All right, welcome everybody back to Athlete Enlightened. So today we've got another video talking about structure and consistency, especially around the gym. Um, I guess this is a topic which it's a lot more mental really than anything else. I'm flying a bit blind today because we don't have the screen up on the right hand corner, so you guys will have to bear with me a little bit when it comes to the technical things. But we will get into, I guess, the first image, and we will look at essentially how structure is really represented in a lot of things that we do around the gym. So a lot of people we talk about are looking for like this magical pill or magical cure-all that's gonna, get them gains instantly or get them results, lose them weight, etc., etc. But I think the main thing to realize is even we see in terms of buildings and structure, everything is built on forms of foundation, right? Even if we look in science and physics, things like how buildings are set up in terms of all the geometric structures, like the triangular bars that go into making buildings and whatever. That's essentially similar to your physiology and whatnot. So basically what we have here is we have a picture that is representing the building format. So we can see that you have the trusses and whatnot that are able to create the geometric shapes that create structure within the building, so that when we look at the building, basically the foundation is supported by these geometric shapes, and it adds structure to the overall foundation of the building. And that if wind or a hurricane or a tornado blows on that building, it will not fall down. Same thing with any other natural disasters. And this is particularly important because the main thing that we want to ensure is that we are building a body, in this case, that has a good foundation, has a good structure, and then it will be able to support itself and fight off things like disease, fight off illness, make sure you recover faster. Okay, so we got the tech issues sorted out. We got the picture now. So thank you guys for bearing with me. Thank you to the producers behind the scenes making sure this show runs. So yeah, we can see we got the geometric shapes that like I said, hold up the building and whatnot. So essentially these are put in place to ensure that whatever structure is being built is built on a stable foundation, is able to support itself and whatnot. And this kind of mirrors the physiology that we're building when we do go to the gym, when we do engage in physical fitness. We are building a better body that is built on a foundation. It's almost like the analogy that's always created when it says the wise man who built his house on rock, and the winds came and the floods came, but that house did not fall. But if you're the foolish man who built his house on sand or on an unstable foundation, when the winds came and the floods came, that house fell, right? So this is a kind of old a parable. I don't know if I'm using that word right, actually, parable, but something that has been said over the ages about the essential nature of making sure that when you build something, it's built on steady ground, it's built on rock, right? It's built on something that is immovable. So we'll go into the next picture and we'll kind of get into how this relates to us. So as we can see, we have the skeletal system here. And the main thing that we should note about the gym too is that when we're developing our muscles, we're also enhancing the structure of our bones and everything around them, right? The bones are like the very foundation. It's almost like the earth that you build a house on, right? And the muscles become the fortitude of that house. It becomes I don't know, like the concrete walls, right? Or, the wood that you put into the house, everything that makes that house secure, insulated, keeps the heat inside, protects you from the elements. This is essentially what you're doing when you're in the gym. You're building yourself into that house that will not fall. And understanding your physiology and understanding all the aspects of your body is important for this reason. And I'm not saying you have to memorize this whole diagram or even know how it works, but you just have to understand that, for example, you're not gonna go in the gym and like lift your heaviest weight first time, right? It's gradual progression. It's gradual building to something greater, right? And over time that goes up and up and up. So when you first start out in the gym, you shouldn't be looking for like, okay, well, what supplement do I need to make sure like this happens or that happens or the other thing happens, like, creatine, BCAAs, beta alanine, whatever. Even the supplements that work, like some of those work, creatine, beta alanine, caffeine, all this stuff, but it doesn't mean that you should say that, okay, I need this in order to go to the gym or rely on it. And the only thing you should really be relying on is your own strength and your own consistency, because that is the key behind structure. The essence of structure is that it's built over time. It's something that accumulates, right? Even if we look at Earth, like things fall in the ground, they sediment, they condense, and essentially that condenses on the ground over time. And, we can even see things like I don't know, like ice, right? Forming on the ground. Yes, ice and the coldness goes into the ground, it goes into the surface of the earth, but it doesn't travel super far, right? Like the core of the earth is still hot, right? It's not like that heat is necessarily leaking out towards the surface or anything, right? We'd have a big problem if it was. So we can see that the surface of the earth is something that is really condensed and kind of I wouldn't say it's recirculated almost over time, right? As we get into like warmer seasons like summer and stuff, when the ground thaws out, or even spring, you can see that, the soil becomes more fertile, it becomes softer. All of the things that condense there are able to kind of like blow away or wash away with rain. So the seasons affecting the nature of soil and the foundation of the earth is very similar to almost what we have in our biology and physiology when we're talking about developing ourselves through physical fitness in the ground, that like we're basically building when we're in the gym, right? So I know that some of this might seem like almost like metaphysical in nature in a sense, because we're not talking about something that we can like traditionally see happening, because growth is a long-term process. And unless like every day you go in the gym, you're taking pictures of every exercise that you do, and your before and after photos, and you do that every single day, you're not going to see that outline of your progression the same way we would drawing an example to nature, right? So this is kind of why I use the example of like the ground and the soil and whatnot, because that is very similar to, like I said, basically the formation of our bones and the formation of our physiology. So like I said before, when we do exercise, we're not just really relying on building muscle or whatever, but we're also densifying our bones. We're making our bones stronger. We're making our whole physiology stronger. We're building our mentality. So we're really ensuring that like the essence that is in the soil that is not needed anymore, like maybe pollutants or toxins or whatever that are residing in the body, are almost like dug up from the ground with the heat that we produce from working out, and that it detoxifies the body naturally. And I would say that this is one of the most important things that we actually experience when exercising, the detoxification factor that we get from generating heat in the body. I'm gonna take a sip of water every once in a while. I kind of run out of breath sometimes talking on the show. So yeah, this is essentially the musculoskeletal system. It's the basis for our whole physiology and how our body operates. And you'll notice that a lot of times, if you're in good physical health, your bones can even flex a bit. There's stories of, people getting swept up into like tornadoes or whatever. But sometimes like they escape unscathed. And why is this? Is because the bones, even though like I think per pound, or something like that, they're the same density as concrete. I could be somewhat wrong about that, but the difference is that they bend a lot more. Bones are able to actually be malleable, and the reason why is because they have water in them. So it's not brittle like concrete, which will break if it's hit with enough impact. And of course, bones break. We've obviously, most of us have experienced something like that at some point in our life. Like, I know I've broken bones before. So bones do break. And traditionally, if you're in good health, that they heal pretty well and they heal properly, and you're able to rehabilitate yourself fairly easily. But the other thing is sometimes that that break doesn't even happen because your bones are in such good health. They're able to bend a little bit. I guess they would say they give a little bit, They're able to be a bit more malleable in terms of something that is able to protect you. Similar to like titanium versus like some other metals. Titanium is really strong, but it's able to bend a little bit. It's not absolutely brittle. But other metals like tungsten or whatever, they might be a bit more brittle, that, they might have similar densities, but you're not going to bend tungsten, right? It's going to be very brittle, and it'll break easily, right? So this is kind of the difference that we're talking about in terms of your bone health and bone structure. And all that stuff is accumulated by your consistency in the gym. So don't just think of the gym as something that, okay, well, I'm building muscle and, that's it. But you're also building your whole body as a whole, right? Everything from your bones to your muscles to your mentality. Every aspect of your being is very developed when you're in the gym and when you're pushing yourself towards reaching a greater level. So it becomes really a necessity to understand just everything that encompasses you benefiting yourself through physical activity if you really want to reap the whole rewards. And also that will push you to say, okay, well, I understand that, maybe I might not necessarily want to go to the gym, but seeing all the benefits that are outlined from doing so makes me understand why I need to go, or why I can't be so inconsistent, and the difference between going once a week and, going like 4 or 5 times a week, right? And kind of cutting out that level of like, oh, well, I don't feel like it today, or like being able to like make some excuse, right, to basically not go because you essentially let yourself off the hook. But structure is all about doing that thing that you would do anyway. It's like discipline, right? It's something that you implement even when you don't feel like it. And those are the people who really win in the end, or get to their goals, where they want to be in life, whether that's physical fitness or accomplishing a certain monetary income or whatever it is. It's just about that aspect of consistency that is integrated into that, right? So making sure that you show up, you do what you're supposed to do, and yeah, it does seem kind of bland, and maybe it lacks a certain aspect of charisma, as we might say, or intrigue or imagination. But I think that even these factors that are very structured can encompass some stuff like that. I notice, like, when I go to the gym, I feel like a peak energy of like inspiration and creativity and imagination, and that's a result of my being structured and saying, well, I need to go to the gym today, so I'm going to go. And then after you implement that, you start to notice that knock-on effect of all those other things happening that are positive, right? So, well, imagination and creativity and that free-flowing nature might not be the grounds that it's built on. It's the ground that it's built on of structure and discipline, and doing the things you want to do even if you don't feel like it, or doing the things that you need to do even if you don't feel like it, is essentially what leads you into those more expansive qualities, right? So it's like building a tower, right? You want to make sure that the tower is built on the ground, but once it's high enough and once it's like beautiful and you're able to encompass everything that's a part of that vision, then you can see above all the other structures, you can see farther, you can acknowledge the essence in which it's built from, right? So even something like, you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, that's a very old structure that's known in the world. And yeah, it was built a long time ago, but still it's recognized across the world as a great structure and something that is a sight to be seen if you ever travel to that part of the world. So these are all important factors to kind of recognize that structures are all over the world, and that imagination is a byproduct of their structure that it's built on, right? So I don't know if we could go to the next picture up here. So we'll get into kind of like the other aspect of this, which is basically the aspect of time, which is essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about structure. Like I said, it's built over time. It's built over like consistent habits that are essentially implemented. And with those consistent habits that we implement, we go into kind of this aspect of, okay, well, how long is it going to take us to reach a goal? How much work do we need to put into reaching a goal? And the thing is that time is such a significant thing because you want to make sure that your goal is time bound, right? We've talked about SMART goals already on this channel, and one of the things that is an aspect of that is time, right? What does a T stand for in SMART? It stands for time, right? It's time bound. And what that means is that there's a time that you can lay out to say, okay, well, by this time, this goal should be accomplished, right? And it keeps the thing realistic and within your kind of like the range of your vision. Because if you have something that it's like, okay, well, one day this is going to happen, or like one day this or one day that, that's not saying like, okay, well, by this time I should have this achieved, or I should have this amount of steps to this goal, or whatever. You can't really measure anything, right? Because time is that unit of measure which you use to essentially track your progress and track how far you are to or from away from your goal or past your goal or whatever. So, if you give yourself like, I don't know, let's say a year to like, bench a plate or whatever, right? I'm just talking in general for maybe somebody starting going to the gym, right? So if you give yourself a year, that's different than saying, okay, well, I'm just going to work my way up, but I'm just going to like kind of do whatever in the gym and kind of float around without any goal, right? Because you don't have that kind of time restriction there. And I'm not saying that, you can't bend it a little, like if you don't reach your goal by this time, like suddenly you're a failure or whatever, or if you reach it quickly, then, you just sit around and whatever. But I'm saying it keeps it in your mind that, okay, well, I said to myself that by this time I should be onto this next thing, or I should be onto this, or, I should be doing that, right? It keeps you in a perpetual movement of progress is the aspect that I'm alluding to here. And that's important because life is all about growth, and you should seek to be better every single day in some dimension, right? It doesn't have to be in the gym, but it could be like you read a book maybe and you learn something and it puts you onto a new idea, and then you build on top of that idea. That's an idea you didn't have the day before. And then if you implement something after that, that's something that you didn't have the day before. And and that cycle just keeps going on, and that's the perpetual motion that is really being implemented. But time is the factor that really cements that process happening, because it's the factor that is showing you that, okay, well, over this period that I'm going to be moving towards my end vision, this should be done, right? And like I said, you can adjust that and reevaluate that along your progress or along your process. But if you don't have that vision, or you don't have that timeline in the first place, that you kind of like give yourself too much slack, So it's almost like if you see like ships, right? When they drop anchor, if the anchor had like so much like give that it just had like endless chain to give, then the ship wouldn't have basically that tether to basically hold itself in place, right? So the concept of an anchor would be useless because the chain is just running endlessly. So that's essentially what it's like when you're like visualizing like something that would be the T in SMART goals, time bound, is that if you keep giving something endless time, then it's not going to say, okay, well, like now you're serving this purpose relative to this goal, right? In essence, what I'm saying is that making sure that you have a timeline in mind of when you want to achieve things is important to ensure that you're on the right track and ensure that you can actually track your progress and make sure that it is moving along. And maybe we'll go to the next image now, actually, and we'll get into a bit how this relates to our physiology. So here I particularly put this image right after because one of the things that physics typically says about the world, and I think this relates to our biology and physiology more than we realize, is that not only do we have DNA, but an aspect of the cosmos itself is actually based on geometry and it's fractal. And physics and physicists have theorized about this for a long time, that there's an element of the cosmos that is fractal. What that means is essentially it's built on some form of shapes, and these shapes and structures, which we might not always be able to see, kind of gives the cosmos its structure and stability, and maybe even allows it to form in the first place. And I think that this is essentially a key aspect to like our DNA and how it operates and ensuring it's in good health. And you know, if DNA is almost like a code, which a lot of biologists and stuff have actually talked about, that, you know, it's all about coding, and, you know, there's spindles wound around the DNA that determines whether genes get expressed or not expressed, which, by the way, you can actually influence by exercising. They're actually finding out now in science that 80% of the gray matter in your brain can actually be changed with exercise alone. So that's pretty interesting, because that governs not only your consciousness and your cognitive processes, but how your brain and body produce chemicals that then influence the gene expression in your biology itself. So basically, it's almost similar to meditation. They talk about the same thing with meditation, that meditation can influence the gene expression. So say, for example, you're somebody who has a lineage of like diabetes or whatever, heart disease, you can turn that off essentially by influencing it through things like meditation and through physical exercise. This is what they're finding out in research now. So this is pretty interesting. But in essence, what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of benefits to exercise, but that comes again over time. And all of these things must be implemented over time. So once you have a time span on which you want to implement something, like your fitness goal, lose 20 pounds, you know, gain 10 pounds of muscle, whatever it is, you know, reach 3 plates on dips. That's probably mine, because I'm at 2 plates right now. So if I can get up to 3 plates by next year, then I would say that's a productive motion in the right direction. In essence, though, what I'm saying is that there's a lot that goes into our DNA, which is essentially the code that we're built on, that we don't know about. And, you know, if we can influence that in some way, even through a basic skill or activity like exercise, like meditation, like, you know, pretty much anything that relates to the body expressing itself in a natural way, then that is going to benefit you significantly. And we'll get into the next image, in which we'll actually look at this image I chose, and I know you guys might not be able to see it, but in the little like DNA, I don't really actually know what this is called, but in the DNA you can see like little, like almost numbers and stuff there, and what it's representing is actually all of those numbers are ones and zeros. And the significance of that is that in terms of computers, that ones and zeros are what form what is known as binary code, which essentially the ones and zeros represent on and off in the system, or in the computational code. And essentially what that means is that if you have a 1, that means the switch is on. If you have a 0, that means the switch is off. And essentially putting those in a specific sequence creates a certain outcome. And one of the things that it's talked about in science, especially in like relation to, I guess, the understanding of neuroscience, which is basically how the mind operates and how cognitive function operates, is that the left hemisphere of your brain, the left side of your brain, essentially, is computational. It operates on logic, and they refer to this as the masculine side of the brain because it operates on logic and left and right, up and down, black and white, ones and zeros, essentially. And it's almost like a code. So basically, this is like, I guess how you would say things operate or are expressed in the external world, right? So basically, when you go outside and you walk and it's cold or whatever, your brain will signal your body to basically express that it needs to generate more heat, or it needs to breathe deeper, or it needs to start shivering, or whatever. It needs to generate heat because it's cold outside, right? And essentially what happens is it's almost like flipping one of these zeros to ones. It flips on a switch in the body, and the body responds differently to the environment. And that's happening all the time with everything. When there's different amounts of light present in the environment, same thing is happening. So essentially this process in which you have these ones and zeros being flipped are expressing different things within the DNA, which then express different things within the human body. And this is really significant because if the human body really does operate at least half like a computation, it means that you can kind of influence it in a way that will connect you with the external experience you want to experience. So, when people talk about visualization and all this stuff in terms of visualizing your goals, that's the right side of the brain. That's the other half. That's providing you the intuitive picture that you want of where that code is going to be expressed. So that's what they refer to as the feminine part of the brain, which is receptivity. It's about intuition. It's about creativity. So all of these aspects that really encompass things that you would typically align with visualization, which is why it's such an objective and effective practice, because visualization is a form of language that can almost be interpreted by anyone, right? It's not even relative to just human beings. Beings have been visualizing things since the beginning of time, right? Since there was anything to basically perceive. So it kind of spans beyond. It's a communication form that is beyond language. It's beyond computational expression, and that's why it's so significant. So visualizing your goals is another thing that can help you on that level of consistency and structure and discipline and all these factors which we're talking about here, to ensure that your code that you're putting into your DNA, the code that you're creating, is one that is essentially benefiting you. And we'll go to the last image here, and so here we see a bit of more like almost like a computational theme. I wanted to say AI because it does kind of look like AI, but here we see like the DNA, but we also see on the right side of the picture, we see all of these like kind of computational forms that almost look like programs. And that is the thing that if you've ever read into scientists like Bruce Lipton, like Joe Dispenza, all of these scientists who've created these books like Becoming Supernatural, that's by Joe Dispenza. The other one's called Biology of Belief, that is by Dr. Bruce Lipton. And all these guys are like scientists who really talk about how your life is essentially a program when you do not have that aspect of adaptability and of change implemented. So essentially that if you don't do something to implement change in your life, such as something that's trying or hard, like going to the gym, like exercise, like meditation, like any of these things that really convince the body into a state of change or move it towards a state of change or program it with some new information, you are essentially replaying the program or tape of your life over and over and over again. So typically that is presented in driving the same way to work, doing the same thing, talking to the same people, interacting with the same social groups, presenting things the same way, talking in the same way, not learning anything new, being cut off from new experiences, whatever, unless maybe that is in your program originally. But essentially, it's that you don't implement something that is out of alignment with your personality because your personality is representative of this program. So essentially, you can draw the example of somebody who doesn't particularly have a skill set of business. They will never learn or be able to learn business unless they implement some change in these forms that I've talked about, such as like visualization or whatever, or like repetition of affirmations or whatever, that is going to move them in that direction. So they're not going to be able to implement business very well unless they have created some kind of change that allows them to essentially download a new program. So download a program into their mind that is essentially them knowing how to utilize business, right? So that essentially is the basis of what they mean by, the human mind is built on programs and the human mind runs programs, etc., etc. And the reason why I'm talking about this and utilizing this picture specifically is that the world is moving into a very technological phase in which everything is becoming automated, everything is becoming based around computational things. We've got AI now, and we've had cell phones for a while and computers for even longer than that. And the basis is that we're moving more and more and more into a technological age that is really built on codes and ones and zeros and, people doing things in certain ways, and essentially the overuse of one aspect of consciousness. And what comes along with that is this computational thinking. So if we can at least understand how to implement that to our benefit, that is something which we can do. That is something that we can implement. That is something that can be beneficial to our well-being and development overall. And if we can learn how to do that and learn how to do that effectively, I guarantee you will be better off than 99% of people, because there are very few people that can actually implement this effectively. And if you can do this, you can pretty much learn any skill you want. You can acquire the ability to pretty much make the world the way you want it, or at least the vision that you want come to fruition and come to pass. All right, that has been Athlete Enlightened today. We've of course had a shorter episode. I'm actually making my change today to go actually meet up with some people who are talking about business and are entrepreneurs. So I'm going to go see what they are up to. Let me know if you guys want to see more content like this in the future in the comment section below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell beside the subscribe button so that you can stay up to date when new episodes are released. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at top_sorcerer, which I will link in the description below. Check out my other content, which I will also link in the description below, such as my podcast Moonstruck and my channel Sword of Mercury. And I will see you guys in the next video.